Welcome to High Stakes English Podcast, where we help you achieve the career breakthroughs you deserve by mastering the language of the boardroom.
And today we're actually looking at how a single, overly polite sentence basically cost a top-performing manager $10,000.
In exactly 3 seconds.
Yeah.
I mean, it's brutal.
It really is. And the crazy thing is, odds of you listening right now, you've probably used this exact same sentence this week.
Yeah, it happens every single day in boardrooms across the world. And honestly, it's incredibly painful to watch.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, imagine you have a solid pound of gold, right?
Yeah.
But the only scale you have to weigh it is completely broken.
Right. It doesn't register the weight at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is what performance reviews feel like for so many professionals.
Yeah.
You know, you're delivering this massive return on investment, you're crushing your metrics, doing the work of two people.
Yeah.
But when it's time to translate that undeniable value into actual compensation, the scale is broken. The results are just invisible.
Because the language fails.
Right. So today's mission is fixing that scale. We are doing a deep dive into maximizing your ROI in the workplace by unpacking power dynamics, leverage, and boardroom strategy.
And, for you listening right now, whether you're a non-native English speaker navigating global teams or just someone trying to decode all this corporate jargon success in these high-stakes moments, isn't about having perfect textbook grammar.
No, not at all.
It's really about translating passive, safe, what we call student English, into high-impact executive English.
Consider this deep dive your ultimate preparation toolkit for your next major meeting. We're going to show you the anatomy of a negotiation failure and then give you the exact vocabulary to rebuild it.
I love that.
So let's start with the real-world disaster we mentioned at the top, Elena's $10,000 mistake.
Yeah, it's a textbook case of having the leverage but completely losing the room.
Right. So here's the scenario. Elena is a senior account manager. She's based in the Philippines, and she's working remotely for a U.S.-based tech firm. And by every metric, she is an absolute powerhouse. I mean, she is hitting 120% of her KPIs.
Yeah.
She's managing 3 junior team members.
Wow.
And over the past 12 months, she has single-handedly saved her company $50,000 in operational costs.
Okay, so her ROI is mathematically undeniable.
Completely undeniable.
She basically holds all the cards, right? Like the company is actively profiting from her extra effort.
So she goes into her annual review.
Yeah.
And, the pressure is on. Her boss is looking at her through a webcam. And despite all of her stats, all that data, she completely defaults to student English.
Oh, no.
Yeah. She looks at her manager and uses the ultimate failure script. She says, and I quote, "I've been working really hard this year, and I was hoping you could consider a small raise if there is room in the budget."
Ouch. Yeah, that's the sound of leverage just evaporating.
And the boss's response was brutally predictable, honestly. He completely locked her out. He smiled warmly, right, said, "You're a rock star, Elena, but the budget is locked right now. Let's revisit this in 6 months."
Of course. The classic deferral.
And what did Elena do? She just gave a polite okay and walked away from a $10,000 loss in potential annual earnings. She lost 10 grand because she was, too polite.
Yeah, and see, it wasn't a lack of professional value at all. It was a total breakdown in strategic vocabulary.
Wait, I have to stop you there because this drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Why does a top performer shrink like that? Like,
Yeah.
how does someone with a documented $50,000 ROI suddenly turn into this meek, pleading employee the second the webcam turns on?
Well, to understand that, we actually have to look at the research from Talleyrand on global teams and cognitive load.
Okay, lay it on me.
So, standard corporate training assumes that language fluency is static, right? It assumes that if you know a complex word on Tuesday afternoon while you're just drinking coffee, you'll obviously have access to that same word on Friday morning during a terrifying performance review.
Which is definitely not how brains work.
Exactly. The brain doesn't work that way at all. In a high-stakes, cross-cultural situation, your amygdala, the fear center of the brain, it triggers a mild threat response.
So you're going into fight or flight.
Right. Your cortisol spikes, and that stress hormone literally impairs the language processing center of your brain.
Wow. So it's not just a matter of, forgetting her preparation. The biological pathway to her advanced vocabulary is temporarily blocked.
Precisely. You lose the ability to deploy that precise, persuasive vocabulary in real time. So what does your brain do?
It panics.
It retreats. It goes back to baseline safe language. And for
Right.
most professionals, especially those communicating in a second language or across cultures like Elena, safety equals extreme politeness.
Right. She confused deference with professional respect.
Exactly.
And the moment you ask for permission to be valued, you've just handed them all your leverage. So let's surgically remove this weak language. We call this the post-mortem, killing student English.
I love that.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Break down the phrase "I was hoping." Why is that specific combination of words such a disaster in the boardroom?
Because it shifts the locus of control entirely to the other person.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, like, I was hoping is entirely passive. It relies completely on the manager's benevolence. It frames your compensation as a favor being granted, rather than, a business transaction being negotiated.
Right. And executive leaders do not care about your hopes.
No, they don't. And quite frankly, they don't care about how hard you worked either. They only care about impact.
So we have to swap these passive, effort-based words for active, impact-based words. Our source material outlines this really specific set of executive power verbs that just change the entire framing of a sentence.
Yes, and this is where the transformation happens for the listener. So instead of saying, I helped with the new software rollout, you upgrade it. You say, I facilitated the rollout.
Okay.
Instead of, I put together the new marketing strategy, you say, I architected the strategy.
Ooh, architected. I like that.
Right. It carries weight. And instead of, I worked on the quarterly report, you use, I spearheaded the quarterly report.
I love this because it perfectly mirrors an enterprise sales pitch.
How so?
Well, think about it.
Yeah.
If you are a sales rep pitching $1 million software system, you don't walk into a Fortune 500 company, stare at your shoes and say, I was hoping you'd buy our software. We worked really hard on coding it.
Right. They would laugh you out of the building.
Literally.
Yeah.
You propose an architecture that solves a specific operational problem for them. Your career is no different. You are a business of one, and you are selling your premium services to an employer.
That mindset shift is so crucial. But, there is a mechanical piece to this as well.
Okay.
A vocal technique that carries just as much weight as the vocabulary itself. It's called the pitch drop.
Oh, yes. Walk us through the mechanics of that. Like, how does a pitch drop change the meaning of a power verb?
Well, when people are nervous, they naturally raise the pitch of their voice at the end of a sentence. It's a linguistic habit called upspeak.
Right, where everything sounds like a question.
Exactly. Subconsciously, they are seeking validation from the listener to make sure they aren't overstepping. So they say, I spearheaded the project.
Oh, that makes me cringe. Suddenly it sounds like they aren't actually sure if they were the one who did the work.
It completely neutralizes the strong vocabulary. I mean, you could use the best executive verb in the dictionary, but if you end on an upward inflection, you sound like a student asking a teacher for a bathroom pass.
It just kills the authority.
It really does. So instead, you must intentionally drop your pitch at the end of the sentence. I spearheaded the project.
Yeah.
Downward inflection. It makes your statement land as an indisputable fact.
I spearheaded the project. You can literally feel the weight of it in the room. It anchors your authority.
Exactly.
But let's be honest, upgrading your vocabulary in your pitch, it only works if you upgrade your underlying philosophy. We have to execute the value flip. We must shift the focus entirely from what you did to what you drove. And step one of the value flip is eradicating the word raise from your vocabulary forever.
Eradicating it entirely.
Yeah.
What is the psychological danger of asking for a raise?
Well, think about what a raise sounds like to a business. A raise sounds like a cost, right? An expense, an unearned handout.
Yeah, it's just asking for more money.
Exactly. You are asking the company to arbitrarily lose money so you can have more money. Instead, you must use the term salary adjustment.
A salary adjustment. That terminology is fascinating because it implies that the current state of affairs is mathematically incorrect.
That is the secret. It is a professional correction to align your pay with the value you've already delivered. It tells the business, hey, the data has changed, so the math must change.
Which brings us to the core philosophy here, right? Cal Newport's framework from his book, So Good They Can't Ignore You.
Yes, the craftsman mindset.
Right. You have to adopt the craftsman mindset. Most people operate with the passion mindset. They constantly ask, what can this company offer me? Does this job fulfill me?
Which is totally backwards for negotiation.
Right. The craftsman mindset flips that entirely and asks, what undeniable value can I offer the company?
It's about viewing your daily skills as accumulated currency, Newport calls it career capital.
Yeah, and negotiation is purely a leverage game. If your skills are common, you are a commodity, and commodities do not get to dictate their price.
Basic economics.
But if you have accumulated rare and valuable skills, your career capital, you hold the leverage. The ultimate goal is achieving what we call the indispensability factor. You want to make it mathematically more expensive for the company to replace you than it is to simply grant your salary adjustment.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Make it mathematically more expensive to replace you. That sounds great in a business book, but like in the real world, if I walk into my boss's office and essentially threaten that I'm too expensive to fire, I'm going to look incredibly arrogant.
Oh, for sure.
So how does that actually play out in the room without getting fired for insubordination?
Because data is never arrogant.
Oh, I like that.
That is Newport's law of financial viability. You never walk into a negotiation demanding money or making threats. You wait until you have a value folder.
The value folder, break that down.
This is your documented proof of specific instances where your unique skills led to a measurable win. In Elena's case, it was that $50,000 in operational savings. You aren't bragging. You are simply opening the folder, sliding it across the desk, and reviewing the math together.
You're removing the emotion from the request entirely.
Exactly. You are shifting it from a personal plea to a logical business decision. But we still have to acknowledge that the room itself is culturally complex.
Definitely.
You have your value folder, but what happens when the boss looks at it and still pushes back?
This is where we need to build a battle plan. We have to do some scenario planning.
And let's start with the cultural dynamic, because that was a massive factor in Elena's failure. Based on data from the Harvard program on negotiation and Tulare, cross-cultural negotiations add an entire layer of invisible complexity.
Right, because different cultures define respects differently.
Exactly. Elena, coming from a Filipino cultural background, is culturally conditioned toward an indirect communication style. That means deference to authority, avoiding direct conflict, and really maintaining group harmony above all else.
But the boardroom she's operating in the U.S. tech firm that runs on a direct Western communication style. The rules of engagement are entirely different.
Yes. So for the listener, if you are negotiating across cultures, you must understand that moving to a direct style is not rude, it is expected. In a Western corporate environment, it is completely acceptable, even respected, to advocate for yourself.
You have to adapt to the operating system of the boardroom you are sitting in.
You really do.
So let's put this into practice and role-play the inevitable pushback. Let's take the exact objection Elena got. Scenario A, the no-budget objection. You present your value folder. The boss says, you're a rock star, but the budget is locked. How do you counter that without folding like a cheap tent?
Well, you acknowledge the constraint without accepting the defeat. You say, I understand the constraints. However, based on the $50,000 in savings I've delivered, can we discuss a performance-based bonus or a guaranteed review in 90 days?
Boom. You aren't apologizing for asking. You are just pivoting to alternative compensation.
Exactly.
What about scenario B, the not now or let's revisit objection?
So if they say, let's revisit in 6 months, you counter with specific conditions. You say, what specific milestones would I need to hit over the next quarter to make this adjustment a priority?
Force them to define the goalposts.
Right. Or you set a hard date. I'm happy to revisit this, but let's set a firm date on the calendar right now so we stay aligned. You never leave the room without an actionable next step.
But here is the friction point. When a boss tells you no or throws up a roadblock, their own stress levels are spiking.
Oh, absolutely.
They are bracing for you to argue with them. So this is where we layer in Chris Voss's negotiation strategies from his time as an FBI hostage negotiator. You have to actively de-escalate their stress using tactical empathy.
And we need to define the boundary here because tactical empathy is not sympathy.
Right.
Sympathy is getting into the emotional quicksand with them. If they say, I'm so stressed about the corporate budget cuts, sympathy is saying, oh, I know it's so hard right now, I'm stressed too. Now you're both just drowning in the quicksand.
Tactical empathy is standing safely on the solid ground next to the quicksand, recognizing they are sinking, and throwing them a rope.
That's a great analogy.
And Voss points to functional MRI studies to prove this isn't just a communication trick, right? It's neuroscience.
Yeah, the fMRI data is wild.
When you put people in an fMRI machine and show them distressing images, the amygdala lights up. But when the person is asked to name or label the negative emotion they are feeling, the prefrontal cortex engages to process the word.
Right, the logical part of the brain turns on.
And when the prefrontal cortex turns on, the amygdala's activity actively diminishes.
So naming the SPI literally calms the brain's fear center.
Yes, so you use what Voss calls verbal labels. Instead of arguing about the locked budget, you look at your boss and say, "It seems like there are internal roadblocks on this budget," or "It sounds like you are under a lot of pressure from leadership to keep costs down."
You label their stress.
Exactly. It lowers their resistance, makes them feel understood, and paradoxically makes them far more open to reviewing your value folder.
Okay, so tactical empathy calms the boss down. Their guard is lowered. But you still have to actually ask for the money.
Right.
How do you pivot from empathy to demanding what you're worth without destroying the relationship? That's the exact problem the radical candor framework by Kim Scott solves.
Radical candor. Explain the mechanics of that, because that term gets thrown around a lot in corporate jargon without any real definition.
It does. So radical candor operates on a 2x2 matrix. On the vertical axis, you have care personally. On the horizontal axis, you have challenge directly. Okay.
To be radically candid, you must do both simultaneously. When you get a no on your salary adjustment, it is incredibly easy to drop low on the care personally axis and fall into the trap of the fundamental attribution error.
Oh, wait. The fundamental attribution error. Is that like when someone cuts you off in traffic and you instantly assume they're a terrible, selfish human being rather than considering they might have a pregnant wife in the back seat and are rushing to the hospital?
Spot on.
Yeah.
You attribute their action to a fundamental flaw in their personality rather than their situation.
Ah, I see.
If you do that to your boss when they deny your budget, if you instantly think, "My boss is a cheap, greedy liar," you fall into the quadrant Kim Scott calls obnoxious aggression.
Because you're challenging them, but you no longer care personally.
Exactly. Your tone will become toxic and the negotiation will fail.
So the boss isn't a villain. They're just a human being dealing with a locked corporate budget. You keep the feedback strictly focused on the impact, not their personality. Yes. You say, the data shows I saved the company $50,000. I understand there are budget constraints. How do we align my compensation with the reality of this data?
That is so clean.
It is clean. It is direct. It sits perfectly in the radical candor quadrant because you are respecting their position while fiercely advocating for your own value.
It completely shifts the dynamic from a parent-child relationship where you are begging for a weekly allowance to a peer-to-peer business negotiation.
Absolutely.
This has been a masterclass in boardroom strategy. To ensure that you, the listener, are fully prepared to execute this, we are going to distill everything we just unpacked into a rapid-fire action plan.
Let's do it.
This is your 30-second checklist, 3 things you must do tomorrow morning before your high-stakes meeting.
Number 1, audit your impact list. Do not walk into that room with hope. Walk in with your value folder. Quantify your wins. Be ready to show the exact mathematical ROI you've delivered over the past year.
Number 2, swap 3 words. Eliminate, I hope, I was wondering, and I tried. Replace them with executive power verbs, spearheaded, architected, optimized, and practice the pitch drop out loud in your car or in the mirror until your statements sound like undeniable facts.
And number 3, prepare a verbal label. Anticipate the no-budget pushback and have your tactical empathy ready. It seems like there are internal roadblocks. De-escalate the tension in their amygdala before you pivot to your counteroffer.
If you follow these steps, your value transforms from a polite request into a concrete fact. But I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over.
Okay.
If you have done the work, if you have built undeniable career capital, if you present a flawless value folder and you execute this communication strategy perfectly.
And they still say no.
Right. And the company still refuses to adjust your salary. At what point does your value folder stop being an internal document and start becoming your ultimate resume to take to the open market?
Wow. That is the ultimate definition of leverage right there. If they refuse to read the scale, you take your gold to a market that will.
Your value is a fact. If they won't buy it, someone else will. Thanks for listening to our podcast. Remember, strategy over grammar.